In 2010, fans of the Transformers franchise were treated to the surprise release in their long-running licensed game fiasco with War for Cybertron. The game was released during the 7th generation of consoles with the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, as well as the PC. It was developed by Highwind Studios and published by Activision of all people. And given how infamous this publisher is, it's a miracle this game didn't get jettisoned into space by Starscream. War for Cybertron served as the first major installment in Hasbro's new launch of the Transformers brand called the Align Continuity, which branched off into several video games, novels, and several TV series. Now, in case anyone's wondering, no, War for Cybertron, the game, has no connection to War for Cybertron, the Netflix series. We don't talk about the Netflix series, okay? The game sold over 200,000 copies in the US, and most critics were relatively positive towards it. Unfortunately, due to Activision not renewing their license on TF games, the game is now off the grid on all digital platforms. But that won't stop me, now will it? With all that out of the way, hey, my name is Jude, and if you've never heard of this game, I'm here to tell you what is Transformers War for Cybertron. So let's get that story out of the way, shall we? War for Cybertron, the game, takes place near the end of the war between the Autobots and Decepticons. We're introduced to their leader, Megatron, as he demonstrates that his answer to any problem is to ram a spaceship into it. And if you don't like his idea, don't worry, you can just give him an objection. Well, after no objections, it's explained that Megatron's goal for winning the war is to use this thing here called Dark Energon. See, a Transformer's equivalent to blood is referred to as Energon. It gives them life, power for their cities, you get the idea. So what is Dark Energon? Well, the game doesn't exactly go into much detail as to where it came from and how it works, but basically it's their antithesis of Energon, in that it's Megatron's instrument of destruction. Along the way, he recruits the protector of the Dark Energon called Starscream, who is definitely the most trustworthy person of all time and will never backstab Megatron ever. With Starscream and the Dark Energon under his control, Megatron goes off to infect the core of Cybertron with the dankness itself. But in order to do that, he needs what's called the Omega Key from the leader of the Autobots, Zeta Prime, where he pulls his baseballs on the cons.
The Omega Key is within my... what? Fool you!
Yep, the big twist for the Decepticon campaign is that it's revealed the Omega Key is actually this giant freak of nature here called Omega Supreme. And after a long, hard-fought battle, Megatron defeats Omega Supreme, Ray shows him on Twitter, and infects the core of Cybertron with the dank substance. And it's at this point, it's amazing none of the cons question if they're the good guys or not.
I was just thinking, we're the good guys, right?
Yes, I believe so.
That's what they told us during the brainwashing.
Orientation, Buford.
The story then continues in the Autobot campaign, where we're introduced to this buff red, white, and blue bot named Optimus, who, after meeting up with Bumblebee and Ratchet, assumes temporary command of the Autobots and begins to push back the Decepticons. Along the way, the Autobots find Zeta Prime, Optimus is named the next leader of the Autobots, and they venture off to restore the core of Cybertron from the Dark Energon. And Optimus is given the Matrix of Leadership by the core of Cybertron itself. The core then explains that the Dark Energon has corrupted it so much that Cybertron has to go offline for millions of years, meaning that the Autobots are forced to leave their home in order to survive. Thus, Optimus gives the order to leave Cybertron, but not before Megatron tells him how he's never going to give them up.
What was that? He's insane.
So now the Autobots are off to stop Megatron by taking down his orbital space station, but the biggest threat turned out to be the space station itself, where it's revealed that the space station Megatron captured in the first level of the game is a Transformer called Trypticon. And after a long, hard-fought battle, Trypticon pulls an Ocelos from Monster Hunter, Optimus Prime Ray shows him on Twitter, and gives the giant dinosaur a big ol' bonk on the head to end the game. So if you're looking for a game with good protagonists and tons of lore, look no further. The plot is pretty straightforward with a couple of good twists thrown in near the end. It also serves as a great introduction to these characters and why they are the way they are. Now I know I said earlier that this is part of the Align continuity, but just know that no, you do not need to know anything about previous novels or shows to understand the plot of the game. It does a good job establishing Megatron's ambitions for starting the war. He wants power to rule, and he knows how to get it, even if he's clearly in the wrong here. Optimus, on the other hand, is not searching for glory, but rather for the right person to step up and lead. And while he's hesitant at first, he eventually learns to accept the responsibility and become that leader. Now, aside from Optimus and Megatron, the game does a great job at giving each Transformer standout personalities and some decent banter to go along with it. Decepticons like Breakdown are big old cowards, Starscream's the most loyal soldier ever, Soundwave is Soundwave, and Skywarp is an idiot. While bots like Bumblebee are young and experienced, Ironhide's the old war veteran, and Warpath gets to be the boom operator. So the game has plenty of characters for you to like and grow on, but what about the gameplay? War for Cybertron is a third-person shooter with the main gimmick being able to transform and shoot in vehicle mode. You'll be playing as one of 3 Transformers throughout the missions, but for a majority of them, you'll have the option to play as either Optimus or Megatron. Each campaign also has one level where you'll be able to play as jets like Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywarp, or for the Autobots, it's Silverbolt, Air Raid, and Jetfire. You can choose between characters like Bumblebee and Soundwave, but there's also some lesser-known robots such as Breakdown, Warpath, and Air Raid, like I said. Now, each character comes with 2 unique abilities in the levels. Some have a dash, others have a shockwave, not that shockwave, whirlwinds, which spin you right round, shields, sentries, you get the idea. So be sure to look at the character select screen and see which bot comes with what so you can figure out which one fits your playstyle. Also, side note, Skywarp and Air Raid are super busted. Like, they can turn invisible and can also whirlwind at the same time. Like, 10 out of 10, super OP, we recommend. Okay, so your abilities can only get you so far, but what other kind of weapons are there in this game? War for Cybertron features 3 weapon types. You got your melee weapons, which are a good way to just close down targets and just bonk them. You've got your grenades, they suck. Like, unless you're using the ones that heal you or stun foes, just don't bother. They do so little damage that you kind of forget they're even in the game. And lastly, the bread and butter of the combat, the guns. The first gun we'll talk about is, your car mode. Like the name of the game, you can transform into a car, a jet, or even a tank. In this mode, you'll go into a hybrid third mode that lets you shoot guns like assault rifles, rockets, and cannons. This is the best part of the game right here. See, in previous Transformers games like Armada for the PS2, which I made a video on by the way, car mode was pretty janky and was only really good for getting the player around the map. High Moon, on the other hand, decided that being able to shoot your guns in vehicle mode made a lot of sense since, well, they're called Transformers for a reason. And thus the mechanic was so good that it transformed the War for Cybertron.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks! What up,
Let's go further into what kinds of guns you're going to be using in the game. War for Cybertron features several different gun types throughout the levels. You've got your assault rifles, which are the most common weapon in the game. The battle pistol lets you zoom in and snipe foes. The EMP shotgun, while having only 2 shots, does insane damage up close.
I got a shotgun.
There's also my personal favorite gun in the game, the X-12 Scrapmaker. It's a fast chain gun that does insanely good damage. There's also the Plasma Cannon, which is just a charge shot from Mega Man X, the Ion Blaster and Fusion Cannon, which, while really good, are only available to Optimus and Megatron respectively. And finally, the last gun we'll talk about is the Heavy Machine Gun. Despite the weapon having slow movement, it can make quick work of foes as it lights them up. And when you grab one, nothing's getting away alive.
I'll just take this with me. Really, Air Raid? Oh yeah! Dinner is served!
Let's talk about some of the levels, why don't we? So, the game features 10 chapters in total. The Decepticons go first, and then the Autobots go last. All of these levels are different from one another, but some levels do take place in similar locations. However, the Autobots get a unique level where they infiltrate the Decepticon capital of Kaon. So, you won't just be repeating the same levels like in some previous TF games. Now, most levels are broken up into several different sections. These involve an enemy encounter, some downtime, more enemy encounters, maybe a mini-boss, sometimes there's a defense section, and then there's always a boss at the end. Now, most of these levels are fine, but before we move on,
right now it's important that we discuss an emergency situation.
Like many other shooters, War for Cybertron features a lot of defense sections where you'll have to stand and fight after waves and waves of baddies. Most of these sections are fine and decently enjoyable on their own. Chapter 8, on the other hand, is not. Early on in this mission, you have to protect Ratchet as he just stands there and heals Omega Supreme for what feels like 10 minutes. Now, with 2 other players, this wouldn't be much of a problem, but since that's no longer possible normally, this part sucks. Ratchet's AI just never thinks to just put up a shield or, you know, shoot the bad guys. And there's a lot of enemies and a lot of waves of them. though you'll more often than not die very frequently in this part. But there are quite a few things that the game does give you to make this part less frustrating, such as overshield, lots of weapons, and ammo. And after what feels like hours and hours of escalation mode, you fight a destroyer and let Omega Supreme do his overdrive move from Guild Seeker Exer to end this nightmare.
Destroy!
Let's talk about the enemies and bosses now, why don't we? Both campaigns come packed with several different enemies. You've got your basic foot soldiers, your overshield shotgunners, which I absolutely hate, your flying enemy types, your cloakers who think that they're so cool and safe when hidden, and then when you shoot them once, they run like they're in Monty Python's Holy Grail. War for Cybertron also features several bosses, and they are pretty underwhelming. See, most of the fights will have you doing basic platforming, shooting some enemies until they reveal their weak spots. And this does not change on harder difficulties. It's just the same thing for a majority of these fights. A good example of this would be the boss against Zeta Prime in the Decepticon story, where he'll drop the ceiling on you, hit a bunch of enemies, shoot his weak spot, rinse repeat 3 times. And the game even shows you a hint at the insta-kill move before the fight begins.
What is that, Rolf? The hat of discipline. Do you live in a cave? All is forgiven.
Now, out of all the fights, I would say that the standout ones are Soundwave, Omega Supreme, and Trypticon. Soundwave has you fight his cassettes like Rumble, Frenzy, and Laserbeak, and once they're weak enough, you can shoot their daddy until he goes down for the count. And Omega Supreme and Trypticon are pretty much the same fight, requiring you to interact with an object to do damage to them until you enter phase 2, where it then becomes a bullet sponge fight. So, while the boss fights are great, they're nothing to really write home about. Now, normally this would be where the video would end, however, we have to talk about the game's multiplayer and escalation mode. We'll talk about multiplayer first since there's a bit to go over. Since this is an Activision game, the multiplayer takes a bit of inspiration from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, in that it features a progression system that allows you to get upgrades and perks for your specific character. These classes include the Scout, the Scientist, the Leader, and the Soldier. The Scout has access to abilities like Cloaker, a Dash, and an enemy marker. And they're the class you'll see the most players use since they're so easy to use. The Scientist, on the other hand, is a super squishy class. They're the support of the game, and they have so little health. They can use abilities like Siphon and Shockwave, but I rarely use this class since, well, like I said, they practically have no health. And then the Leader class has access to Warcry, which is insanely busted since it buffs your health and damage. Like, seriously, it's crazy how overpowered this thing really is. Now, the Soldier class is my personal favorite, since they get access to Emerald Drops and Whirlwind. Also, each class has access to certain robot modes, like how Scouts are cars, Scientists are jets, Leaders are trucks, and Soldiers are tanks. The multiplayer also comes with several game modes. You've got your basic Team Deathmatch, your Capture the Flag modes, Code of Power, whatever that is. Yeah, there's quite a few modes to choose from, but honestly, I rarely played this growing up because, well, this is a shooter from 2010, so the matchmaking is not good. There's a lot of in-game latency, poor hit detection, stuff like that. However, if you really want to play it, there are ways to play the game online in 2022. Link in the description below. Now, the last bit of online we'll talk about is the escalation mode, which is my personal favorite part of the game. Escalation, to put it simply, is a player versus enemy horde mode, where you and 3 friends can fight waves and waves of foes. There's quite a few maps to choose from for both Autobots and Decepticons. You defeat enemies to collect money, which can be used to gain access to better guns, unlock certain rooms, and grenades if you really want. Now, some maps will feature environmental hazards that you can buy to take out some enemies at a time, or sentries to help deal with the massive amount of onslaught from foes. But given how expensive these can get, I rarely use them. Like, ever. They also do, like, no damage to the enemies either. So you're not completely helpless, but if all 4 of you go down, yeah, you're not getting back up anytime soon.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
It's all right. I'm an emergency vehicle.
Now you may be wondering, dear viewer, can me and my 3 friends possibly defeat escalation mode, Jude?
Oh my dear boy, of course they can.
Yes, unlike other horde modes, escalation never ends. And I do mean never. The only way to quote-unquote win is to quit the game or just die. Because after like 20 waves of enemies, this thing gets really repetitive. So, while escalation is pretty fun at first, it overstays its welcome after a while. But there's a ton of fun in trying out the different characters for the stages, which gives you a ton of variety on how you can approach the maps.
What a
Okay, so let's go over some tips and fun facts about the game, shall we? The game features tons of secret characters and Easter eggs. By beating both campaigns, you unlock both Slipstream and RC for the multiplayer and escalation modes. Zeta Prime is absolutely busted in escalation. He has access to both Ammo Beacon and Warcry, making him essential to survival. There's also a lot of references to previous shows and movies as well. More specifically, the 1986 film. Like when Ironhide woke up one day and was like, I'm gonna talk to this whatchamacallit here.
Ba weep, grogna weep, ninny bong. What was that? That's the universal greeting.
Good sir, that is a slug. In Chapter 7, you can spot both RC and Jazz among the captured Autobots. And just because Jazz is in prison doesn't mean he can slack on his push-ups.
147! 148! 149!
The game features 2 DLC packs, which come with more characters, multiplayer, and escalation maps, such as Jazz, the second in command of the Autobots, Onslaught, the leader of the Combiner group, the Combaticons, Shockwave, the one-eyed scientist, Dead End, a member of the group called the Sedicons, as well as Demolisher and Scattershot, who are nods to their Armada and Cybertron counterparts respectively. As of 2020, the game's servers were shut down on all systems. However, a group of fans banded together and managed to get the online back up and running. So shout out to the Transformers Re-Energized Discord server for helping collect footage of this game. So hopefully this video gives you a good idea of what this game is and how it plays. If you wish to purchase this game in 2022, you can't, because this game and all Transformers games were delisted from Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation back in 2017. So that sucks. So the only way to play this now is to hunt down either a Steam key or a physical copy on PS3 and 360. I would say that the best way to play this is through the PC version, since there's a ton of mod support to get the game running at 120 FPS, and it has a ton of mod support as well. War for Cybertron is a great third-person shooter that deserves more love and attention nowadays. And while the game does have its shortcomings in certain areas, it sets the foundation for all future Transformers games under High Moon Studios. And honestly, with a few quality of life changes, I think this game would be really good if it got a sequel of some kind, hint hint. But we'll save that for another day. With all that out of the way, please like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you have a blessed day. Take care.